Здравствуйте, товарищи. I'm very honored to be here representing Mexico with Maria Eugenia and Dr. Heinz. So in order to not bore you and so you don't fall asleep, I'll be fast. It's the US regime change policy, the principal threat to global security. Okay, since the beginning of human organization into tribes and later into states and nations, the strongest ones have been attacking the weaker ones. But why does a strong nation attack against a weaker one? Well, to increase its power and expand territorially, of course. And this implies gaining control of valuable resources, the subjugation of its population, to get free or very cheap labor, or to impose its ideology or conception of the world. A strong hegemonic power will attempt any strategy to fulfill its interests, including changing the government of another nation or country that won't let it do what it wants or get what it wants. This is called social Darwinism in human societies. Survival of the fittest and the law of the jungle. Of course, under this logic, the greatest threat for global security is the actual US policy of regime change and provocation of war, not only in Latin America, but all around the world. These are the doctrines that they have been using to implement regime changes. The most famous and the one they use in Latin America is the Monroe Doctrine. America for the Americans. Yes, but let's not forget that for the people of the United States, the only Americans are themselves, North Americans. It was supposed to be for protecting the American continent from European powers, but let's not be naive. It's easy to tell that this doctrine leaves the door open for the US to act in the whole continent as it pleases, with no real limitation on its actions. The next one is Eisenhower Doctrine, which consists in military assistance and intervention against what he called international communism. Also, the Kennedy Doctrine: stop Cuba at any cost, exterminate the fruits of the Cuban Revolution and its influence in other Latin American countries. The Reagan Doctrine: spread neoliberalism and aid anti-communist guerrillas and finance paramilitary groups. Also, the Clinton Doctrine, which consists on color revolutions. They combine the power methods of influence with technologies of manipulative control of mass consciousness and mass behavior of civilian population. They are disguised as true revolutionary movements against political regimes, but in reality, they are not the true representation of people's wills, nor the objective of the implementation of their hopes and aspirations. They're traps. Also, the Wolfowitz Doctrine, which consists in preemptive military action to suppress potential threats from other nations and prevent any other country from rising to the superpower status. Well, but of course you're familiar with this regime change policy. It's the same policy Washington have been using in the color revolutions in Eastern Europe and Middle East, the Arab Spring, in Libya, Syria, Egypt, Yemen, Tunisia, and the Euromaidan Revolution, Ukraine and Donetsk. However, I'm going to explain more about this regime change in Latin America. First, of course, the US imperialist expansion at the beginning in the 20th century. It is well known that the uprise of the United States as a superpower is linked with the emergence of its multinational corporations. The Banana Wars are the example, with the purpose of defending the economic interests of the multinational companies like the United Fruit Company. Here we can see Cuba, Puerto Rico, Philippines, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Panama. Another period was during the Cold War. They imposed right-wing military dictatorships via coup d'etat in Latin America during the Cold War in order to keep controlling the area and stop communism to spread. Here we have the examples of Guatemala and Paraguay in 1954, Brazil in 1964, Argentina in 1966 and 1976, Bolivia in 1971, Chile and Uruguay in 1973, El Salvador in 1979. The third one is ending the pink tide in Latin America. The pink tide is the turn to the left some South American nations gave during the 2000s decade, going away from the neoliberal model. It is called pink because, well, it's not red, it's not communist, it's a lighter tone, so they call it pink tide. The examples are the Kirchners in Argentina. They accuse them of corruption, using the media to attack them. Lula da Silva and Dilma Rousseff in Brazil. One was sent to jail, the other one was impeached, both with charges of corruption. Fernando Lugo in Paraguay, overthrown via a parliamentary coup. Manuel Zelaya in Honduras, overthrown via another coup. And now the White House has declared publicly that they will use this same policy of regime change against what they consider now the Latin American axis of evil, consisting of Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba, and Bolivia. Here we have some examples of the tweets of John Bolton, Marco Rubio. They are the neoconservatives, or as I like to call them, neo-fascists, menacing any country or any nation or whoever supports any of these regimes. Even in the last one, he says, as President Trump made clear today, Russia needs to get out of Venezuela. This was very recent. Now, Mexico is also in the eyes of the US. They haven't said it publicly yet, but they will also try to sabotage the newly elected Mexican government of Andrés Manuel López Obrador. And why? Well, because Mexico is a strategic zone, both politically and economically. It is the largest Spanish-speaking country in the world, the second most populated country in Latin America after Brazil, the second economy in Latin America after Brazil, and recently, on March 17, 2019, AMLO declared the end of neoliberalism in Mexico. So, of course, United States is not going to like this. And also, its foreign policy is based on the respect for the self-determination of the people and national sovereignty. This is called Doctrina Estrada in Mexico. So why is the US so desperate? Well, because it's in decay. Militarily, the US has already lost advantage of strategic weaponry to Russia. Economically, well, by 1950, USA used to dominate more than 40% of the world economy, and by 2008, it was reduced to just 8%. The development of science and technology, well, it has lost its major advantage to China. When it comes to land and territory, both Russia and China have more than the US. And the population is also another factor, because China and European Union have more population than the US. And right now, the BRICS have 40% of the world population. So the question everyone does, and the one Lenin is famous for, что делать? What is to be done? Well, in Latin America, there needs to be an integration of political training, cadre schools, a new vanguard for Latin America, also coordination and disposition with both China and Russia to help provide the means of an economic symbiosis to make a qualitative leap in the economy development of the region and resist the intensification of the American aggression. And at last, the creation of an international organization of researchers and scientists who cooperate and focus on maintaining global security, with centers all over Latin America. Thank you very much. Спасибо.